I'd probably say that it's more true that when a watch company tries to relaunch or make a new version of a current watch, a well-standing watch, that it's more common for them to get it wrong. But in Omega's case, with the new Aqua Terra, they've killed it with this. Welcome back to Bark and Jack. I'm Adrian, and today's watch, the Aqua Terra range as a whole, in fact, will always be something quite special for me because, and I'm sure you guys feel it as well, when you get to the point of being very close to buying a watch, but for whatever reason you just don't, that watch will always mean something. You always feel a connection to the watch. There are millions of watches out there, and so I think it's nice when we have this emotional connection to a watch, and that's what I have with the Aqua Terra range. So when Omega announced that they had a new Aqua Terra, I was so keen to get hands on with this thing. And whilst we're on that, no, this isn't a sponsored video by Omega. If it was, I would absolutely tell you that this is just Omega lending me a watch. They don't get to preview this video. They don't have any say on what I say. Typically, I only borrow watches that I want to borrow, hence why I've borrowed this. 2 points before we get into this watch. One, if you're looking for an awesome watch, but you have a modest budget, and you want to get Omega, you want to get an Aqua Terra, but this is now a very pricey watch at £5,000, check out the very early Aqua Terras. Check out the quartz one in particular. Depending on where you are in the world, you can get these for under £2,000, which is still a sizable chunk of cash. But it's one of those watches that you won't really ever need to grow out of. Second point that I want to make, and we can discuss this, if you're annoyed that Rolex launched the 36mm Explorer and discontinued the 39mm Explorer, I think this Aqua Terra ticks a lot of the boxes that perhaps the Explorer 39mm did for you. So let's have a look at some of the specs on this thing. So Omega say it's a 41mm wide case. It is, 41mm wide. We also have 20mm lugs, and it's 13mm thick. Now that is in the middle of the sapphire, because we do have a domed sapphire here. It's 12mm thick on the edge of the case. Now that 13mm does sound quite thick, and I guess when you look at it side on, it does look thick. So my Explorer 2 is a millimeter thinner than the Aqua Terra, but actually because of the way that the case is designed, the Aqua Terra looks thinner. The Explorer 2 is very slab-sided. The bracelet drops straight down as soon as it leaves the lugs, which allows it to have 52mm for the lug to lugs. Bracelet tapers down from 20mm to 18mm, so that's a decent taper. And we have this little butterfly clasp, but there is no bracelet extension in this watch, which I do think is a bit of a shame considering that this is a sports watch. The sapphire crystal is domed ever so slightly, and it has anti-reflective coating on the underside and the top side. You do need to be careful with the anti-reflective coating on the top side because that will be scratched. This has a screw down crown and a screw down case back and has 150 meters of water resistance. Now, the thing that I love about the Aqua Terra range, along with the OP range and the Explorer range, is that complication-wise, they are very simple watches, time only, and in this case, time and date. But the actual performance of these watches is amazingly good. The water resistance on this is absolutely brilliant. You can pretty much do anything apart from serious diving with it. But then the other side of this watch is the movement inside. This is powered by the Omega Caliber 8916. Without any unnecessary hype, genuinely, this movement is one of the best performing mass-produced movements on the market. This movement is phenomenal, not just from an accuracy point of view, but also from a utilitarian point of view. This thing has been COSC certified, which mainly focuses on the accuracy of the movement, but it is then META certified, which then puts the movement through further stress testing. I've gone through this in detail when I did my video of my Omega Seamaster. So the technical side of the movement is clearly brilliant, but from a user experience point of view with the movement, it is, again, brilliant. Something that really pushes Omega perhaps to a different level of thinking about the user experience. Normally when you set the date on a watch, you have a separate click, you have a separate notch within the crown, and that allows you to interact with the date wheel, and you can easily spin around and do your dates. Now that's great if you have to change the date a lot, or if you have lots of watches and the watch dies and then you need to change the date, you can easily do that. I love what Omega have done. Rather than having the crown position to just interact with the date, they have a crown position that just interacts with the hour hand. That is far more of a useful function than having a date function. You can still quickly set the date, not as quickly as you would with a dedicated date position, but this is a function that you are more likely to use if you travel just jumping back and forth through the hours. And Omega tell me that you can just freely change a date whenever you want and how you want, to go back and forth, and it is very happy. I think that is a really good, luxurious thing to have, is to have a movement that you can interact with easily and is designed around the user using it as opposed to the watchmaker making it, if that makes sense. Now, this watch costs £5,370, which I think is a tricky price because it pushes it to be the more expensive version of its peers. But that being said, the Rolex Explorer, for example, you're unlikely to get it at retail price. If you want a 39mm version, that is now a very expensive watch. And so that then makes this look really quite reasonable. What I think is very clever about this watch, and something that really stood out to me, is I associate small seconds with vintage, with old design. I love it. I absolutely love small seconds, but I associate it with watches of old. And so technically that would be a vintage inspired thing that's been added to this very modern watch, but how it's been executed, I think it further makes this watch more modern. It adds to the sportiness of this watch, despite the fact on many other watches, small seconds adds to the formality of the watch, adds to the vintage look of it. But here, I think it complements the rest of the dial. I think this has been done brilliantly, and I absolutely love it. And that was my point from the start, where I love the original Aqua Terra, the very simple looking, very relaxed, very subtle watch that is the original Aqua Terra. This is a brilliant transition from that, or a brilliant addition to that range, because you can still get the very relaxed looking, the normal looking Aqua Terra. This is an additional design of it. I think it works brilliantly. And I do believe, although this design is very different from an Explorer, 39mm Explorer, I do believe that if you were looking for the 39mm Explorer and you wanted that style of watch as opposed to that look of watch, this ticks all the boxes. This is a very, very high-performing watch. If you had your heart set on a 39mm Explorer, go check this out. The design is very different. The feel is very different. But the technical characteristic of the 39mm Explorer, that has it here. Two criticisms with it. One, I feel like it should have a better clasp, some sort of extension within it, especially for this price range. Very, very few watches come without bracelet extension systems, and I feel like this is missing from here. And just a personal taste, a personal preference, I prefer this to have a brushed bracelet as opposed to polished. But as a whole, I think this is brilliant. And I know the question is going to be, if I was to choose between a Seamaster Professional, the SMP 300, or the Aqua Terra, I'd have both. I think that's the answer. Guys, let me know your thoughts. Do you like the small seconds Aqua Terra? And what would you choose? I know there's going to be a lot of Omega people watching this. What would you choose between the Seamaster 300 and the Aqua Terra? Anyway, guys, give me a follow on Instagram at BarkandJack. Oh, native straps. I've tidied it off this. We've got new mugs. I guess this is our first part of merch. So the handle's all nice and rustic. It's all been hand painted. So it's no cheapy enamel mug. This is the real deal. But it's a bit of merch. And that's how I'm able to do these impartial videos where I don't have to take money from watch companies to be able to do what I do. Use cameras that are insanely expensive and use lights that are equally insanely expensive. Because I have a shop and I sell products, and that allows me to be impartial, which I think just keeps the content real. Anyway, Instagram at BarkandJack, shop barkandjack.com, and what else is useful? Subscribe. That's not my watch. And I'll see you guys next time. Take care.